Hello, dear friends. It's good to see you here again. Let me ask you something. What if being alone wasn't loneliness, but liberation? In our modern world, solitude is often seen as something to avoid. But in the teachings of the Buddha, time alone can be one of the most precious gifts we give to ourselves. Not for escape, but for awakening. I used to resist solitude. I filled every quiet space with questions, hoping noise would drown out my discomfort. But eventually, the silence became my greatest teacher. Today, let's walk together into the heart of solitude and discover the power it holds to bring us peace, presence, and clarity. So often, we fear being alone. We fill the silence with noise, the stillness with movement, and the emptiness with distractions. Loneliness feels like a shadow that follows us, especially when we are disconnected from others or from ourselves. But Buddhism teaches that solitude is not the same as loneliness. Loneliness is the feeling of absence. Solitude is the experience of wholeness. Even the Buddha, before his great awakening, spent long days and nights in silence, alone under the Bodhi tree, not in despair, but in deep presence. He met the contents of his mind without running from them, and through that stillness, he awakened. I remember once sitting beneath a tree for hours, not in meditation, just watching my breath. At first, it felt empty, but slowly, it felt like coming home. It's in that homecoming, in that stillness, that something deeper begins to emerge. Because solitude isn't just about being alone, it's about learning to listen. In solitude, the mind quiets, and what has been hidden beneath the noise can finally rise. Monks and nuns across generations have sought silence, not to isolate themselves, but to listen more deeply. In the stillness of solitude, we begin to notice our thoughts, our patterns, our longings. And slowly we see that we are not those things. We are the space in which they arise. Solitude becomes a mirror, not always flattering but always honest. It reveals our attachments, our avoidances, and gently invites us back to center. There was a time when I feared what I'd see in that mirror. But one day I realized even my discomfort was part of the teaching. That's when solitude became less of a struggle and more of a friend. Once we stop resisting what the mirror reveals, we begin to uncover something even more powerful. A sense of refuge, not built from walls, but from within. The Buddha once said, "Be an island unto yourself." This was not a call for isolation, but for self-reliance, an invitation to find peace within, rather than chasing it outside ourselves. When we spend time alone, not in boredom, but in mindfulness, we begin to realize our worth is not measured by productivity, nor our happiness by how full our calendar is. Solitude teaches us to come home to ourselves, to sit with our joy and our sorrow, without needing them to be different. We become our own refuge, and that is a quiet kind of power. In the early days of my practice, I often looked to others for guidance. But it was only when I stopped reaching outward and turned inward that I began to hear the quiet wisdom already waiting inside. When we begin to trust that inner wisdom, solitude shifts once more from something we practice to something that heals. And this healing doesn't require isolation, just intention. You don't need to retreat to the mountains to embrace solitude. Moments of aloneness can be found in the simplest of ways. Try this. Wake up a little earlier and sit in silence. Or take a short walk without your phone. Breathe. Observe. Be. Solitude becomes healing when we no longer fear the company of our own heart. You may be surprised what begins to bloom in the silence. A forgotten dream, a buried hurt, or a small voice inside that says, "I'm still here, and I'm listening." That voice has spoken to me too, sometimes faint, sometimes clear. It says, "Stay, watch, listen." And each time I do, something within me softens. In these quiet moments, in the softening of our hearts, we realize that solitude was never emptiness. It was spaciousness. And in that space, something sacred begins to speak. Dear friends, solitude is not something to escape. It is something to embrace. When we learn to be alone with ourselves, we find we are never truly alone. Because in that quiet space, the entire universe begins to speak. Thank you for sharing this moment of stillness with me. If this teaching spoke to you, please consider liking this video, leaving a comment, and subscribing to join us on this journey. Until next time, may your solitude be gentle and your heart at peace.